Welcome to the Meta Report, a series discussing builds in Path of Exile. And for week 1, I specifically want to focus on League starters, which builds were successful, which ones weren't, and a few interesting choices that I wasn't quite expecting. Before that though, I wanted to get into a couple of quick community highlights, starting with a big congratulations to Ben, or Lighty, or Darky, who won the boss event with an amazing single session all Ubers run. He managed to kill all the Uber bosses significantly faster than most players defeated their quest either. So congratulations on the win, and we'll see what the card is in the near future. In other news, it seems like MP found the loot. All those items you were missing, yep, they're hiding in ghosts all along. He posted some absolutely ridiculous nonsense with loot covering the screen to the point where you can barely move around. But now let's move on to builds, looking at which ones found success and which ones are likely to keep finding success moving into week 1. Here we have the latest report on Pewee Ninja. So I'm going to start by looking at day 3. And I'm also going to set it to 90 plus characters. As you can see, the most popular build is Lightning Arrow, which surprised me. I wouldn't expect a fairly squishy, clear focus build to be everyone's first choice, not only when it comes to League starting, but further in Trial of the Ancestors where yes, Lightning Arrow's clear is excellent, but also the monsters hit really hard, so I was expecting more people to opt into Tenkiei builds. Not that they aren't on the list. Now Artillery Ballista, that's kind of tied to Lightning Arrow. So is Returning Projectile support, not sure if that's showing up, Vol Lightning Arrow. Then we have Hex Blast, a more bossing focused minor build, which I've also talked about previously. Moving on, Bone Chatter. This is the kind of tanky build that I was expecting to see up at number 1. Righteous Fire, another tanky build that's pretty good at clearing, and just based on my experience playing Cold Dot Elementalist, I would say that Righteous Fire does decently in the League mechanic, but maybe not as well as some of the other things on the list. Then we've got Spark Inquisitor. This is probably one of the best things for the League mechanic, as you have all of a wide screen clear AoE of something like a Lightning Arrow, coupled with Persistence, and you can precast, and it's all sorts of fun. Summon Raging Spirit, same, extremely strong for the League mechanic. EA Ballista, also strong, you drop your Ballista Totem down, and you run around, you click totems, your Ballista Totem will do all the damage. Now, interestingly enough, here we've got Exsanguinate, and I wasn't expecting to see Exsanguinate on the list at all, never mind this high. More about that in just a bit. Then Toxic Rain, Fire Trap, which in part is Fire Trap Elementalist, and in part is tied to Righteous Fire. Vortex, we've got a lot of Vortex builds, a few Vortex Ignite, and down here Corrupting Fever, which kind of rounds out the list at number 11. Though Frostblades, Detonate Dead, and Impending Doom or Doom Blast, also making it into the top 15. As a note, Doom Blast could be underrepresented here because there were some bugs with Spell Cascade, Doom Blast, and overlaps, making the build a lot less popular. Next, let's look at day 5 and see what changes. Again, level 90 plus. Honestly, not too much changed by swapping to day 5. This tells me that a lot of people who picked the build, they aren't really re-rolling off, they're happy with their choice. The only really notable change is Fire Trap moved up a few ranks, and I think Lightning Arrow moved down a little bit. Moving on to, actually, let's go latest snapshot. Again, level 90 plus. So what we can deduce from this is a lot of people who started these builds are happy with their League starter and haven't re-rolled. Also, what we can deduce is Righteous Fire continues to be a very good and well-rounded build, due to its prominence in all the lists, and if anything, I expect the prominence of Righteous Fire is going to go a little up over the next couple weeks. Also, there was a bug fix on Doom Blast, and as you can see, it's moved up just a bit, regaining some of a loss because people had swapped off of it. I kind of wonder, though, how many people swapped to Exsanguinate, or specifically Poison Exsanguinate, because their Doom Blaster wasn't working out. That might account for why it kind of came out of nowhere. Now, going back to day 3, there's something else I wanted to look at. That is unique items. So these are things people are using early on, and the reason that this is important, any item on this list could be potentially valuable. In fact, if that item is still on the list, it's something else to keep an eye out for. So I'll show the latest snapshot after the day 3. And so here's a few items to keep an eye out for. Hyri's Truth, an amulet for bow builds. Calm Spirit, also typically used on bow builds to gain rage and maintain berserk. Taming is good for any attack elemental build, so think bow builds, and also Frostblades. Heat Shiver, if you're doing cold damage, you want to be wearing a Heat Shiver. Vol's Vision, really good for extra regen, say to power your Calm Spirit. You'll notice bow builds are having a big influence here. Profane Proxy, plus the level of socketed Curse Gems turns your Skitter into an AoE. This is typically used as a budget version of Curse on Hit. I don't really like it. I'd rather go with a Mark of Submission into a real curse ring, with a couple of exceptions, like if I'm on an Elementalist that's automatically inflicting shock anyway, okay, I can get rid of my Skitterbot's Shocking Aura, but at that point, why am I really running Skitterbots? So maybe I'm using a chilling skill like Vortex, and I can get rid of a chilling aura. There's a big give or take here, and I'm not a huge fan of the item, especially because in the early league, it was worth around a Divine, and I just don't think it's worth it over using a Mark of Submission. You get a little resist, and that's pretty much it. Immortal Flesh, great league start item, also common enough that it's never really expensive. Bisco's Leash, if you want to go fast or Magic Find, Rampage is the way to go. Tanuahi, these gloves are great. I actually called these out as something to keep an eye out for last league, and they got completely underrepresented. Flew right under the radar at the last league start, so I'm really happy to see a lot of players using them, because this is another way to go faster and get adrenaline. I think last league most people just opted for Death Rush, and is Death Rush better? In a lot of cases, yes, but in a lot of cases, you don't want to give up a ring, and you can wear a Tanuahi. Watcher's Eye, I'll skip. Mark of Submission, I've kind of already talked about. Jinx Juju, if you're a minion player, you probably want this, or if you have a minion, because 10% of damage from hits is taken from Spectre's life before you. Aurabots also like this for the increased effect of non-curse auras from your skills. Not a stat you can usually get on an amulet. Dendrobate, poison builds love this. It's really well balanced for early stats in terms of damage. Does lack defenses. Cooldown point, base fizz skill, poison builds love it. I mean, Corrupting Fever also does, so we're going to see a lot of that. Yoke of Suffering goes with the Ellie damage stuff. Call of a Brotherhood converts lightning over to cold. Taste to Hate, Ming's Heart, another chaos thing. Diadian Dawn for Ignite. Eye of Malice, if you're playing either a fire or cold build, you can set enemies' resistances further negative. And at this point, it kind of goes into more generic items, though Legacy of Fury is also quite popular for the pseudo-explodey burn effect. And now, setting it to the latest snapshot. As you can see, Watcher's Eye going way up, a lot of the more endgamey items starting to dominate on the list, and seeing a bunch of the less endgamey items fall off, like Here's Truth going down all the way to 9%, well behind the 18% Watcher's Eye. And so now, I want to take a look at a few specific builds and talk about how they work, starting with a Lightning Arrow character, where we track their progression from day 1 all the way to day 6. So here we have a Lightning Arrow Deadeye. A lot of this is exactly what I'd expect. Non-crit, precise technique, very good way to start out. You definitely want to get your Endless Munitions, also grab Tailwind and Focal Point. All that makes sense. They already have a Calm Spirit. They're using both Immortal Flesh and Vol's Vision to power the life regen required for this. And they're using a Kavuri Ward. This isn't really an endgame item, but it's super economical, and on a budget, it gives you a lot of accuracy, proj speed, and feels great to use. The rest of their gear is just very basic rares. This is day 1, so I wouldn't expect to see much. Then on day 2, they've got a Taming. This is going to add a lot more damage, and as you can see, the Kavuri Ward is upgraded to a Hyrie's Truth. Not only does this mean you can use Precision, so they're probably going crit, but bow attacks have Culling Strike. And unsurprisingly, yes, they have gone crit. At this point, they're dropping Farshot. They don't need the extra damage. Instead, are going with Ricochet for even more clear speed. This is someone who wants to map and knows how to do it. Day 3, they've gone Omni. That's right, Crystallized Omniscience. This is the endgame of bows, and it shows what you can do if you really snowball your currency and progress quickly. From here, we've also got a Hyrie's Ire, and all the juicy things you'd expect. Though maybe not plus arrows on the bow yet, as that's quite expensive. So, from here, it's just a matter of polishing that gear up. And sure enough, not as much is going to change. It's just going to be subtle little things. The next big upgrade I'd expect is something like a Headhunter or Mageblood. Because realistically, once you have this level of gear, you can kind of just keep polishing what you have and not worry about the rest. So that's just an example of someone who progressed very quickly on a Lightning Arrow Deadeye. On the other hand, let's say you wanted to go at a more normal pace. You didn't end up getting the massive amount of currency needed to go Omniscience early. Here's another day 1 build, and you'll notice the Calm Spirit and Vol's Vision. This time, we've got a Here's Truth. And Bisco's Leash, the item that I mentioned, helps you go fast. The faster you can farm, the better. And the rest of this gear is pretty mediocre. That's okay, it's day 1. Notice that they're still going fire shot for extra damage, but have gone crit early. Next up, we've got day 2. Progressing through with a Venter's Gamble. Something like this, not too well rolled. It's going to give you quant, and if you're going bow MF, you definitely want a gold worm. They're also reasonably solid boots. Not the best, 10% move speed isn't amazing, but not the worst either. Going MF, they're a little bit more reliant on the extra damage from fire shot, so probably will be keeping it throughout most of the progression. Day 3, the big upgrade is a Hyres. Hyres adds a significant amount of damage. You can see 235-100 versus 159-66. Obviously, that's not the actual damage they're doing, this is just an approximation, but it gives you an idea of how much they gained. Day 4, kind of applying all that speed and damage, but not changing all that much. Did their bow change? Nope, bow is pretty much the same. Day 5, again, no big changes. And day 6, no big changes. So this tells me that they got to a point where their gear is comfortable, they have enough to farm maps, just blast, and they're saving up for something big like a Headhunter or a Mageblood. This is what I would call a relatively typical progression for a Lightning Arrow Deadeye. Though typical is obviously individual to every person, the way I would progress the build is probably quite different from the way you would progress it. For me, my gear would look absolutely atrocious day 1, 2, and 3, and then all of a sudden I'd have really nice stuff because I got tired of having atrocious gear and sat in my hideout crafting for a while. But next up, I wanted to talk about the Exsanguinate, because there's 2 really interesting setups I've seen. First is the Cold, or Cold and Fire, Heat Shiver Exsanguinate, and this specific setup is using Minefield and Charged Mines with high impact. So this is an Exsanguinate miner. Therefore, the actual damage per hit is relatively low as opposed to self-cast, but you get to lay a whole bunch of mines and absolutely nuke bosses. The reason this is interesting to me is we've got a Rise of a Phoenix adding a good bit of extra defenses. Their plan as an Inquisitor is probably to run Righteous Fire in the long term. Grimsar, of course, provides the cold conversion, and Heat Shiver adds cold as extra fire, since you should hit relatively hard and be able to freeze stuff, especially with double damage procs. Also, if you thought that Blood Notch and Immutable Force were dead, oh no, they're still alive and well, and super important on a build like this, because you have a relatively low life pool. Though with the armor, at least there's some physical mitigation. And let's just take a look at the latest snapshot to see how their gear has progressed. They've gone full-on low life with a Prism Guardian. This unlocks a bunch of offensive auras for absolutely massive damage scaling. But hey, the Magnate still works, because you want a stat stack, and getting the 10% chance for double damage, 15 cut. 5% chance for triple damage is a great way to increase your DPS. I also wanted to quickly call out the Eternal Struggle, a really cool amulet, where you either get Malignant Madness, or a 15% Culling Strike. This is based on whether the Eater or Exarch is dominant on the item. The reason for the Diala's Malefaction is you can get additional tendrils, or just simply increase the level of your Empower for massive damage. But if a gem scales off of either level or quality, something almost universal to all gems in Path of Exile, they scale off one or the other, Diala's is a great chest. The only problem is, as you can see, their build has progressed in a very squishy direction. Where with 4.6k life, and probably, yes, Petrified Blood, then Eldritch Battery, because they're not using a jewel to convert it, this is very much in the squishy high damage. I think the mechanics are cool, but this is not a build that I would want to play personally. That said, they're level 97, which is higher than me, so clearly it's working for them, and that just goes to show that different setups work better for different people. The setup that I find much more interesting personally, and what I would play if I was going to go for an Exsanguinate build, is Poison Exsanguinate Pathfinder, in part because Pathfinder is one of the best ascendancies in Path of Exile right now, and it feels really good. So let's pull that over here. At level 95 on day 3, this build is doing pretty well in farming. And with the Taste of Hate, I approve of the very well-balanced approach to both offense and defense. Life is a little bit low using Ming's Heart, but Ming's Heart provides a massive amount of damage, especially when combined with Cold Iron Point, boosting the Exsanguinate up and giving Fizz as extra chaos. Alternatively, if you didn't have the Asenaths yet and you didn't need single target damage but wanted clear, you could go with an Obliteration Wand. It has Fizz as extra chaos, similar to the Ming's, but gives you nice explodey effects. So you can see here, Exsanguinate, Deadly Ailments, Awakened Unbound Chain, Spell Echo, Efficacy, and Chain Support in a Dendrobate. +2 duration gems is quite nice, and level 10 chance to poison, meaning it's going to be really easy to get 100% chance to poison. Also, the Ancestral Vision means they're probably ailment immune, so that's pretty neat as well. Now, coming down to look at the passive tree for a second, it's pretty much what you would expect. Some good spell suppression nodes up here. The nice flask nodes. Every time on a Pathfinder you want to take these, they feel amazing, and it lets you do fun things. Plus, dual curse, which I would say is especially important for any sort of poison build. Looking at the latest snapshot, let's see how their gears progressed. So they're level 100. This is a very fast and efficient build, and they probably didn't die all that much, given that Pathfinder has effectively infinite defenses. So, as you can see here, they are using a Topaz Flask and a Ruby Flask. On most builds, you would not want to use flasks to cap your resistances, but on Pathfinder, that's what you get to do because it's up 100% of the time. Unless you do something like stand in a lab trap that steals your charges, don't do that. But in general, this is very, very powerful. Furthermore, you get a lot of damage scaling very easily. As you can see, 5.5 mil poison DPS, which, while it might not sound like a lot in terms of PoE Ninja Warrior standards, well, if all you want to do is go through and absolutely murder things in maps to reach level 100, this is a great way to do it. Plus, you don't even need a cold iron point. Instead, it's a +1/+1 Chaos Dot multi-weapon. That is a very nice dagger that probably went under the radar because most people don't make Chaos Dot multi-daggers. And as you can see, they still have the Taste of Hate. Silver Flask for permanent onslaught. Still using the Ming's Hearts. I would expect over time one or both of these is probably going to get dropped. And from the fact that they're both anointed, I'm going to guess they're a Blight Farmer, which is a particularly profitable thing to do early League. Last but not least, on the helmet, you've got a little cast speed to make the build feel better, and Fizz taken as lightning. Personally, I think that Fizz taken as on a Pathfinder is one of the best decisions you can make, which is also why they don't really have much armor. Is this going to be super tanky and tank the hits of Uber bosses? No, but while mapping it has all the defenses you need and none of the defenses that you don't. Then looking at the latest snapshot, the build I just highlighted, right here, sitting at number 2, proving they are a very quick leveler indeed. But those are my thoughts on the most effective League starters and a couple builds that surprised me along with some information about them. If you have any thoughts on these builds, maybe you played either the Cold Exsanguinate Miner, Poison Exsanguinate, or Lightning Arrow Deadeye, be sure to share your experiences down in the comments below. So now I wanted to close the discussion out with a little bit of economic information. First up, tattoos are really cool and they're going to have a big impact on builds. So some of them are steadily rising, including flask duration tattoos and explodey tattoos. I expect as more people use them and as people use more of them, these will continue to go up over time. The max res tattoos should also rise in value over the course of the League as more people want to use them defensively, and utility effects like spell suppression will stay pretty stable, because which build doesn't want to just add a bunch of spell suppress? People are also finding a lot of really clever ways to use tattoos, so look out for things like Thread of Hope, A Natural Instinct, and Impossible Escape being especially expensive this League. And if you're looking for a fun new way to make money, consider the Forbidden Sanctum, because that money printer go burr. Now, in terms of my runs, I haven't been too lucky. Not only have I not gotten any original Sin runs yet, but I didn't even get a Divine for my first completed Sanctum, which was super disappointing. Though that's probably because it was a very low level one, and I did get a Divine for my second one, which unfortunately is exactly when I wasn't recording. So instead, enjoy this footage of my very scuffed first Sanctum completion of the League. With that said, if you're able to reliably complete Sanctums, they take a little bit, but tend to give you a unique relic that you can use to immediately run another Sanctum, so they sort of self-sustain and loop infinitely. At least a lot of the time. I've had one of those drop so far from 3 total runs. But I've heard people say that it's a lot higher, at least 50% for most people. I just have a very small sample size, so my numbers are unreliable. And last but not least, the rewards for Trial of the Ancestors just got buffed. If you want to know more, I made a video on it, or you can read all about it over at MaxwellGG. And so that brings the meta report to an end for week 1. If you're looking for something else to watch, then I have some thoughts on Forbidden Sanctum, some of the money-making strategies I've been using, and much more that'll be linked up in the card and down below, or you can go over a recommendation that's on screen right now. Or if you prefer reading to watching, we have a full Lightning Arrow guide over at MaxwellGG. If you're still hungry for content, maybe check out MP's Ghost Farming, because I'll link that down below as well. But for now, before I go, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for their continued support. Link to support is down in the description, and it's in large part because of support from viewers like you that I'm able to make videos just like this one. But with that said, thanks for watching to the end. I certainly hope you enjoyed. Maybe you'll learn something about builds and league start situations. And if you want to see week 2 of a meta report, do be sure to get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there. I'll see you again very soon.